So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 2022 General Meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm the current president of the Civic Fed. Thank you all for joining us this evening. This evening, we've got two very interesting presentations for your information and use. The first will be on the pedestrian master plan, and we have a presentation from Eli Glazier from the planning department staff. And then we'll have a briefing on the state highways plans to replace the American Legion Bridge and to undertake a traffic relief plan for I-270. Before that, we have some Civic Federation business that we just take care of routinely. And the first thing is approval of the agenda for this evening, which is on page 2 of the Civic Federation newsletter. I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda. There's been a motion to approve. There's been first. Is there a second? It's been first and second. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
The agenda has been approved. The second thing is to approve the minutes from the September 12th general meeting, meeting number 935. Those minutes were included in the newsletter, and that's on page 17 of the Civic Federation newsletter. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the September meeting. Is there a motion to approve? It's been first. Is there a second?
Second.
Looks like it's been seconded by Peggy Dennis. Any discussion? Any edits? I'll call the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the September meeting, say aye.
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 Thank you. The minutes from September have been approved. Next order of business is a treasurer's report. And with the treasurer's report, we'd like to include a request to approve the budget for fiscal year 23. In the minutes, it says 22, but this is for fiscal year 23, I believe. Jerry Garson, our treasurer.
For the budget for the fiscal year starting July 1st, 2022, ending June 30th, 2023, we expect to have membership dues at $2,300, our post office box and postage are $130, our website $600, Federation meetings $50, awards dinner $160, offices, supplies and support $300, committees $100, memberships $300, insurance $650, miscellaneous $10, with a total expenses of $2,300 expected. If we do have an in-person dinner, will be budget will be revised, and we'll have no net income or net expenditures. For the fiscal year 2022, starting July 1st, 2022 through October 10th, 2022, we have $375 of membership dues that have been paid so far. Website at $298.28. Federation meetings at $50, memberships at $300, miscellaneous at $1, giving us total expenditures of $649. And at the moment, we have a deficit of $274, but I suspect I got one additional membership that we noticed today, but the money has not reached our treasurer.
And our balance?
Our balance is $8,429. And I'll make a motion that we approve the budget, which is included on page 7 of the Federation newsletter. And I'd ask you to take a vote on it.
It's been moved that we accept the budget. Is there a second? Karen Cordry seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the budget that's on page 7 of the Civic Federation news, raise your hand, indicate approval somehow. Okay, thank you very much. Looks like anybody disapprove? Abstentions? Seeing none, the budget's approved. Thank you all. At this point, and before we get to our two presentations this evening, it's a time for announcements. If anybody has any announcements they'd like to make, for the people on the call. I've got several. If you think of some while I'm going through my list, please indicate by raising your hand electronically or wave it frantically in the window. Tomorrow night is the anticipated COJO in the Community Program, which will take place at the Montgomery County, the Silver Spring Civic Building. I think it starts at 7 o'clock. They'd wanted you to RSP online. I don't know if that's necessary. It's about housing issues in Montgomery County, and it looks like it's a very popular, it's clearly a popular topic, and it looks like it's going to be a very well attended event. So that's at the Civic Building tomorrow at 7. Those of you interested in public safety issues, Safe Silver Spring is going to have its quarterly meeting with Montgomery County's 3rd District Police Commander and his deputies. That's going to be a Zoom meeting. You can find out more information about that on the Safe Silver Spring Facebook page, or contact me separately if you're interested in participating. On November 10th, the day before Veterans Day, Silver Spring Town Center, the Montgomery County Commission on Veterans Affairs, and the American Legion are going to host our annual Tribute to Americans Veterans concert. That's free at the American Legion. Our performer is a guy named Seth Keibel, who's a master clarinetist, also plays saxophone and plays the flute. He'll have some of his friends performing with him. That'll start at 6 o'clock, probably go to 10. Open the bar, well, paid bar. There may be some food, but it's a tremendously interesting event. We'll have some of our elected officials and some of our veterans making presentations, between 6 and 7. If you're around Silver Spring, we'd like you to join us for that free concert. And then finally, the Thanksgiving parade. The county's Thanksgiving parade is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. If any of your homeowners associations or civic associations want to join the Civic Fed and the Thanksgiving parade, please let us know. Anybody have any other announcements? I saw some hands up just quickly. Peggy Dennis?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hot dog. It's been many years since I went to a COJO in your community event, but they are very good. And I think this upcoming one tomorrow night will be on Thrive, although it hasn't been advertised as such. I'm up here in Vermont. Luella's up here with me, so we can't go in person. Can you give us a report on how it goes? Anyone who's going to be there tomorrow night?
Yeah, we will do that. Chris Reynolds?
Yeah, I was just going to say again about COJO in the community. I just looked this up. So to clarify, you do have to register online ahead of time. They tell you to print out or bring on your phone your ticket, and they will be checking vaccination status. So bring your vaccination card or a negative test, as well as you have to be masked the whole time. So just don't get kicked out. Take care of those things, and you'll be all right.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Peggy. Enjoy your trip and take some pictures for us. Well, let's turn over to the first of our programs for this evening, and I'm going to let Eli Glazier from the Montgomery County Planning Department to talk about all of the good work that he's done on the pedestrian master plan. He's presented it to the board. He's done outreach to the community in the way that we expect outreach to community to be done. And we want to thank him for all of those efforts. Eli, we're really excited that you could join us this evening. And I'm going to let you share your screen, and please proceed. Talk to us for about a half hour, then we'd like to ask some questions.
Great. Can you see my screen? Just give me a nod. I see plenty of nods. See a lot of familiar faces here. So my name's Eli Glazier. I'm joined today by the head of the Countywide Planning and Policy Department, Jason Sartori, is on the call as well. And before I get in, I'd sort of be remiss if I didn't thank Karen Cordry, who has been a diligent member of our community advisory group as a representative from the Civic Federation for the pedestrian plan for the past several years. So I see her on the call, so really appreciate her participation and her insights. So yeah, my name is Eli. I'm the project manager for this plan. Really excited to talk to you about it. The particular emphasis of today's presentation is about these draft policy design and programming recommendations we put out. But first we'll talk about what the plan is, why we're doing it, what the goals of the plan are, how far along we are in the planning process, the types of recommendations there are before going into these specific recommendations, and then a timeline for the plan moving forward. I don't have a ton of time, so I will be quick. This plan is really the first time the county has looked across our entire jurisdiction to identify ways to make walking and rolling safer, more comfortable, more convenient, more accessible for people of all ages and abilities. The idea with this plan is that all trips within a short distance should be realistic pedestrian trips. And what that means is it's not that everyone should walk for these shorter quarter-mile trips to the grocery store or the post office or whatever, just that walking should be a viable option for people. There should be sidewalks that connect places. There should be appropriate separation from the street. There should be places to safely cross intersections and things like that. This plan is really about providing more transportation options for more people countywide. This plan was specifically called for in the county's first Vision Zero action plan in 2017. Vision Zero is an international approach, but adopted in Montgomery County in 2016, that basically says that no number of traffic fatalities or severe injuries are acceptable on our roads. And one of the ways we can achieve zero fatalities and severe injuries on our roads is to make pedestrians safer, because pedestrians are really the ones disproportionately likely to be severely injured or killed on our roadways. Additionally, improving pedestrian conditions also has other benefits beyond safety, so public health, economic benefits, climate benefits, and equity benefits as well. This plan, there are several goals in the plan. The first goal is to get more people walking and have more people satisfied with their pedestrian experience. The second goal is to create this comfortable, connected, convenient pedestrian network so people can take the trips they need to take and want to take on foot. The third is to enhance pedestrian safety. And the fourth is to do all of these in an equitable and just way. So make sure our recommendations and how they're being implemented is in the spirit, in an equitable spirit, and is helping to address existing and historic disparities when it comes to comfortable access. So I first presented, this plan kicked off in September 2019, and people on this call may or may not remember, I presented to the Civic Fed, I think back in maybe before the plan even formally kicked off in late 2019. I think it was actually Veterans Day 2019. I have a habit, I think, of presenting to this group on federal holidays. So I presented in the Richard Montgomery auditorium about the plan and where we were going on the plan, and gathering ideas from folks about just big pedestrian issues that were happening in the county and that a plan like this could deal with. So in addition to the Civic Fed, we met with many other groups across the county, both in person and then during COVID virtually, to really get perspectives and understand that while the county obviously has a lot of very diverse land uses and sort of pedestrian situations, there were a lot of common threads that tied together the experience across the county when it comes to pedestrian issues. Stories that we heard and the experiences that were shared with some really hard data in our existing conditions report, which was published in March of this year, which involved 4, I would say, very unique data collection efforts that the Montgomery Planning Department spearheaded. So our countywide pedestrian level of comfort analysis essentially measures pedestrian comfort on every sidewalk, every trail, every crossing location in Montgomery County, using things like street sidewalk width, landscaping buffer width, speed limits, the number of lanes you have to cross the street, all this different information to help us understand and provide some insights into areas of the county where it's really comfortable to walk and areas where it's not. We also coordinated with Montgomery County Public Schools in late 2019 on a student travel tally to understand how students are arriving to and departing from school, with the understanding that this plan would really aim to make it easier and safer for kids to walk to school. So we would anticipate having more students walking to school in the years to come. We looked at the pedestrian crashes that occurred between 2015 and 2020 to better understand where crashes were happening and under what circumstances those crashes were happening. And then lastly, but I think really importantly, we conducted a statistically valid countywide survey, essentially sending postcards with a unique survey link to 60,000 randomly selected households across the county to get their perspectives on the pedestrian experience, including reasons for walking, how often they're walking, how satisfied they are with different elements of the pedestrian experience. And this was the first time that the planning department had done a statistically valid survey with a margin of error, working with an outside firm for a countywide plan, a plan of this scale. And I think we really appreciate the data that came out of this, and the sort of wide-ranging nature of the questions and the number of people we were able to reach and things like that. So all of this data came together in the existing conditions report, which is available on our website, which is www.montgomeryplanning.org/walking here. And we essentially took the data and the findings from the existing conditions report, the work we did in the public engagement process. These two things really provided us a great foundation for of the pedestrian issues that needed to be addressed through our recommendations. And our recommendation development, which is ongoing, is really our effort to guide the county in the years ahead to addressing the issues that were identified in our public engagement and then in our existing conditions findings. So the types of recommendations in this plan, these design policy and programming recommendations are these high-level recommendations. We're also going to be using putting forward a data-driven prioritization for where pedestrian capital projects should be, with a focus on pedestrian connectivity, school access, equity, and other data points, so we can make sure our limited resources are going to the places where they're would have the highest value. Pedestrian shortcuts. I think we're well aware that in the county, sidewalks and trails may not always provide the most direct path between where you are and where you want to go. So over time, people have created these dirt connections, these connections through the grass that really is the shortest path between point A and point B. This set of recommendations is about understanding where those connections are and then working with the county to improve them so they're more accessible for people, they're safer for people to walk on after a weather event or at night, something like that, really just providing more connections to make pedestrian trips shorter. And then the last two, adding recommendations for side paths, which are wider shared pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the more rural parts of the county. So people in those areas through development projects or through capital projects can get dedicated pedestrian infrastructure. And then the last bit here is about the Complete Streets Design Guide, which is an effort with the Planning Department and the Department of Transportation to better provide walkable connections in some of the more built up parts of Montgomery County. So this technical translation really just puts that design guide document into practice and into effect. And I can share, or maybe Jason could post links to some of these things in the chat so folks can have access to them. But so these are all the recommendations in the plan. The main ones I'm here to talk about today, though, are these design policy and programming recommendations, which are the high level recommendations that if they were implemented today, wouldn't necessarily change the county into a more pedestrian friendly place overnight. But as sidewalks are built, as intersections are reimagined, as routine maintenance is done, and as new lighting is installed, we're going to see Montgomery County be remade for the better in a really systemic way. These recommendations, there are 34 of them, 34 high-level recommendations around 6 themes. The themes are build, which is about building things, maintain, which is about ensuring that what we've built remains usable for years to come. Expand access is a set of recommendations about accessibility. Monitor is a set of recommendations about keeping us honest as a planning department and as the county, and improving transparency about the plan implementation process. And then fund is a set of recommendations that essentially grapples with the idea that we've really underinvested in sidewalks and pedestrian safety for decades now. And we, while there are many competing priorities for funding, we may need to be creative about ways we can make up that deficit. So within these 6 themes, 34 high-level recommendations and 94 key actions, which when implemented will achieve the intent of the recommendation. There's a lot of these recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to walk through each theme, skipping around and explaining a few from each theme before moving on. And at the end, in the Q&A period, we can definitely go back and dive deeper into some of the specific actions, specific recommendations and their key actions if people are interested. These are the build recommendations. Some of the bigger recommendations here. B1 is about just building sidewalks faster, using a data-driven process rather than a reactive process to build sidewalks, so they can be built where they're needed, and we can use local knowledge from neighbors to make them appropriate for the context. But at the end of the day, there's a large deficit in where sidewalks are needed versus where they're being built every year. So any way we can speed up that process and streamline it to get more sidewalks built is a good thing we can do. B5, I think light pathways and crossings. One of the top things we heard from people at meetings and through the countywide survey was the need for improved lighting. This recommendation seeks to update the lighting standards along pedestrian pathways and at crossings, so pedestrians can see each other when they're walking, and then pedestrians and motorists can see each other at intersections, so everyone's safer. B10 is probably the big one in this section, which is, it says assume county control of state highways. And what I think we mean here is to develop a plan to assume control of state roadways in some of the more built up parts of the county, so our downtowns and town centers, and along our master planned bus rapid transit corridors. And I think the reason we want to do this, the reason we want to start this conversation, is that we've seen that these state roads in Montgomery County are the ones that have the destinations that pedestrians want to access, but at the same time, they're designed in such a way that it's very dangerous and uncomfortable for people walking to walk along them or to cross them. So that creates a lot of conflict. And this recommendation really aims to just start that conversation to move these roads under county control for a couple of reasons. One, so we can have more design flexibility about how we reimagine these roads to be more pedestrian friendly. And then two, I think there's really an element of good governance here, creating some local accountability for roads in Montgomery County. I think this has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to many of you. You've reached out to Montgomery County DOT about a specific road or a specific sidewalk, only to be told that actually it was a state road that you were inquiring about. And that's not very satisfying for community members. It's not very satisfying for the people that have to say that or do say that. And by bringing these state roads under county control, we're really eliminating the buck passing that happens and that can happen when people are trying to get things done from government. So I think it's a good government measure, and it would really improve our ability to be responsive as a county to improving pedestrian safety in these areas. So I'm going to keep going. We can definitely talk about that later. The maintain recommendations, MA1 here is about being more proactive about fixing sidewalks, creating a county-wide sidewalk inspection and repair approach that proactively assesses sidewalks across the county on a rotating basis and then improves and repairs those sidewalks based on the assessment findings. We think being more proactive will help the county to repair sidewalks before they deteriorate, which will allow for cheaper repairs over time and a better pedestrian experience countywide. MA2 is about a suite of recommendations about improving how our sidewalks are kept clear of snow, trash receptacles, overgrowth, and other things like that. And then MA3 is about using utility construction. So when utilities are replacing power lines or cutting into the roadway for opportunities to improve the pedestrian environment, whether that's widen sidewalks or restripe crosswalks or things like that. Protect, this set of recommendations. The big recommendation here is really about how we grapple with an important element of the pedestrian safety crisis we're currently in, which is essentially large vehicles that have really poor pedestrian visibility, which are these tall trucks and SUVs. So P1 includes recommendations for the county to lead by example by not buying vehicles with demonstrated pedestrian safety issues, and by installing intelligent speed management software on county vehicles, so county employees are driving the speed limit and leading by example in that way. In addition, there are some recommendations here for additional driver education for people driving these larger vehicles to essentially help provide that increased education, really to help mitigate some of the design flaws that these vehicles have. And there's also a recommendation in there to improve the education component of the driver's license renewal process, so drivers can get up to date on changes to traffic laws and other things like bike lanes and signals and things that have changed and may have changed since their last license renewal, just so people are getting that continual driver education. P6 is about making the walk to school safer. So this involves a few things. First, adding funding and locations for more school crossing guards along our busier roads, funding what are called walking school buses, which you can think of as like chaperoned walk, chaperoning kid using, having adults, sort of the parents of kids, walk with a group of kids to get to and from school safely. Looking into implementing school streets, which are arrival and dismissal partial roadway closures to improve pedestrian safety. And then I think lastly, just looking at Montgomery County Public Schools as a whole and identifying ways that we can reduce sort of single occupancy vehicle travel. So by reducing sort of traffic around schools and going to schools, we can really reduce the likelihood of children and all pedestrians really being involved in crashes and potentially severe and fatal crashes in school areas. Expand access. Like I said, these recommendations are sort of under a general accessibility theme. I think the low-hanging fruit here is to make sure is EA1 to reduce street tripping hazards, to make sure our sidewalks and other surfaces are safe and smooth to walk and roll on. I think what we heard from a lot of community members was this was a particular issue for brick sidewalks. So making sure that brick sidewalks, especially, but all sidewalks really can be smoothly traversed by people of all ages and abilities using wheelchairs, blind pedestrians. Sort of a tag along recommendation to that is EA2 to remove sidewalk obstructions, which is about getting things like utility poles and traffic signal boxes out of the sidewalk so there's more room for people to walk and roll. EA4 is about making sure that the pedestrian push buttons that are all across the county, which in some places give you, if you press it, it gives you the signal to cross the street, and in other places it helps provide people with low or no vision some wayfinding to help guide them across the street. In many parts of the county, these signals are actually located in places that it may be difficult for blind people to use them. So making sure that they're located in places where these groups can actually use them is really important. And then there's some other recommendations in here about working with Montgomery Parks to provide more park experiences that are accessible. So accessible to people who are blind or may have intellectual disabilities or other disabilities, just making it easier to get out into nature for people of all ages and abilities. And there's a couple more in here about construction zones. So improving the quality of the pedestrian travel through construction zones, making sure there's appropriate detour that's safe and not too out of the way. And then regulating our shared spaces. So ensuring that pedestrians on shared streets have the right of way over bicyclists, scooter riders, drivers, and other users of the road. I'm almost done with these, but monitor, I think simply the most important recommendation here is we will be tracking implementation of this plan. Every 2 years, we'll be publishing a monitoring report to track progress, but then we will also have a website where you can see progress on implementing these recommendations, but also how many miles of sidewalk we've built, how many signals have been redesigned, all these different metrics from across the county. And then lastly, And these recommendations just identifying new funding sources because there's a large deficit in what needs to be done versus what is currently funded to be done. Some of these sources could potentially include increased automated traffic enforcement fines, market priced on-street parking fees, things like increased vehicle registration fees for these larger vehicles that have demonstrated pedestrian safety issues. There's also, I think, an opportunity to just levy a tax across the county, a certain amount. I think what we've seen, there are peer jurisdictions like Seattle, for instance. Seattle voters passed a referendum to essentially tax themselves to provide sidewalks and other pedestrian infrastructure for the city. So something like that is something that we could maybe explore just to provide additional funding to make a more pedestrian friendly Montgomery County. So in addition to those design and policy and programming recommendations, we have these other recommendations, like I said, and the next one, which there's actually an opportunity right now to participate in sort of shaping, is looking to prioritize locations for these pedestrian capital projects. We recently released a tool we're calling the Pedestrian Prioritization Tool, which will help us create this data-driven approach to prioritizing where pedestrian pathways and improved crossings should be built. Essentially, on the screen, you can see there's a map, and then on the right sidebar, there's essentially a list of 10 factors, which are greater places with greater pedestrian activity, places with more pedestrian crashes, places that have less comfortable pedestrian pathways, less comfortable pedestrian crossings, places with missing sidewalks, equity areas, commercial areas, areas that provide greater school access, areas that provide greater transit access, and areas that have sidewalks in poor condition. And essentially what you can do is you get 100 points and you can allocate those points based on what types of places you want this money invested in. You can allocate those points between these 10 variables, essentially. And then if you click visualize after you spent your 100 points, the map on the left will show you where the funding would be targeted based on the priorities that you've identified. So you essentially review the factors, assign points to each factor, click visualize, and then you can actually, at the bottom of the screen, which is a little bit cut off, you can click submit prioritization and share that prioritization with the planning department, which will then help us develop a plan prioritization that we can bring forward and use to sort of guide the capital budget and things like that in the years ahead. So all of the things I've talked about, including the prioritization tool, are available on our website at www.montgomeryplanning.org/walking here. I'd encourage you to review all of the design, policy, and programming recommendations and their key actions. You can share your perspectives with us. In addition to what I shared, which is really just the high-level recommendation, some of the key actions, all of the key actions have a rationale and more information about them and who would be the agency responsible for implementing them and what goals of the plan that recommendation addresses. All of that's on the website. And then this pedestrian prioritization tool is also on the website. So I've said a lot. This is our timeline moving forward. We've done community engagement through the end of the summer. We presented the recommendations, these draft recommendations that I just shared with you, to the planning board for their feedback September 22nd. We're continuing community engagement about this plan through the end of the year. I'm also writing the plan at the moment as well, with some, I think, a lot of the text obviously subject to change based on the community feedback that we get. And then we're hoping to begin work sessions with the planning board after a public hearing at the beginning, sort of in the middle of January, early 2023. So that's a lot. There's an index here essentially of all the recommendations. I see there's a bunch of stuff in the chat that I guess, Alan, do you want to moderate this, or how do you want to proceed?
Well, I'm going to ask Jackie to moderate it because she does such a wonderful job.
Fantastic.
But I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions that I have. And one of them was about the recommendations, taking the build group, for example, 1 through 12, Are they in some sort of priority order? How are they ordered?
I wouldn't call it a priority order. I think B1 is probably the most important, but I think thinking about the priority of these is something that we'll circle back to as we write the draft plan to maybe reorient these. If you have any insights or perspective into sort of what you think the priorities are, I think we would definitely welcome that.
Well, not me in particular, just curious, seeing this presentation, why one was in front of the other, but it's amazing work. And, thank you so much for all you've done and for the outreach. I had an outreach question. You said that you sent out 60,000 postcards to Montgomery County residents, and that was almost unprecedented. We like reaching out to residents and asking for their input. I was wondering, what kind of response did you get out of the 60,000?
Yeah, so we worked with a survey consultant on this, and they said to expect about 1,200 responses out of 60,000 postcards. We got double that, about 2,400, which led to a margin of error on the survey of about 2%, which, if people are familiar with polling in general, is a very, very good, very low margin of error, which indicates that the responses that we got were likely very much in keeping with the county-wide, sort of what the response would have been if we had polled the entire county. So yeah, we got about, I'd say, 2,400 responses back. I've also sent out postcards separately to many of the homeowners associations, civic associations, religious organizations that just from the planning department list that we have, to also share information about the plan, sort of separate from that survey process.
Well, I'd just say we wish you had done that for the Thrive plan, because there are 1,400 people on that list who didn't know about it, but that's another subject. And then finally, for me, I was curious how much coordination at this point. I know this plan is not in final, but a lot of this work needs to be done in coordination with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, State Highway, and MTA. It's a particular issue of concern where I live in East Silver Spring, where the Purple Line alignment goes down Wayne Avenue near two schools. Wondering to what extent you and your colleagues are reaching out to DOT, SHA, and MCPS at this point in your work.
Yeah, so in addition to the community advisory group that we had that Karen was a member of, we also have had this entire time an interagency working group. So at every step of the way, we've been briefing and getting feedback from the Department of Transportation, permitting services, MCPS, the utility companies, State Highway, et cetera, on and on and on. I think those conversations are ongoing. And we look forward to really coordinating. And I think my job moving forward, once this plan is approved and adopted, will be continuing to do that facilitation and coordination to make sure that these recommendations are implemented, and figuring out ways through coordination to make sure that they get implemented. So it's a good question.
Thank you so much. Jackie, can you moderate? And if anybody on the call would like to ask a question, can you use the raise hand function so
Yes,
we can
please
get?
go to the reactions at the bottom of the screen and press it. You can raise your hand there and I'll call on you if anyone has any questions. Okay, Jerry Garson, you're up first.
This is Jerry Garson, the chairman of the Transportation Committee. After reading all 62 pages of the report, I have about 20 recommendations. How do you want us to send the recommendations? And I think after the P3 people speak, we're going to have a Transportation Committee piece that I'll accept then and recommend making changes. Some of them are minor, some of them are major. One of them is, first one is, why only improve comfortable access to elementary schools and not middle schools and high schools? But those are the type of questions we're going to ask.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have my email, so feel free to send the recommendations that you have to my email, and I think we'll work through
Yeah, I
those.
have it. There's no problem.
Yep. Great. That's awesome. I appreciate it. I think, yeah, any insights that anyone can provide to make the plan better, I think we're definitely amenable to that. Thank you.
Liz Joyce? You're muted. You're still muted, Liz. There you
Thank you for this great presentation. I wanted to ask Jason, Ellen's point about surveys regarding Thrive is really important. Have you done statistically significant surveys to get a sense of what residents understand about Thrive? Because I assume no, but I don't want to say that that hasn't happened without getting your input.
Yeah, I need to check on that, to be honest with you. I wasn't actively engaged in the Thrive outreach effort, but I know that I'll drop a link to the outreach and engagement appendix that I was actually taking a look at it just now, that we've posted on our website that talks about all the different outreach and engagement efforts that we did undertake. I know that there was a survey. I don't think it was pushed out, the one that I'm thinking of, through a postcard effort, the way the pedestrian master plan one was. But there have been a number of kind of similar efforts.
I would also, I guess I would add, I think there was a fairly recent data for progress poll that went out that was about Thrive. That may provide some of the insights that you're seeking from, I think, a planning department survey. I think we have learned a lot through the pedestrian plan engagement process that I think we're hoping to move forward with and sort of institutionalize in our planning efforts, particularly at the countywide level, when it can be so, I think, challenging. There's obviously larger engagement challenges when it comes to dealing with the county as a whole. And we think a survey may be an appropriate approach to sort of reach more people and get perspectives from a countywide, from across the county.
I totally agree, which is why I'm asking this question. And Jason, I'll email you personally. I think such a survey has not been done. And I don't want to make that statement without checking with you. And I don't have time to research it because I'm going to be speaking for the Civic Federation tomorrow evening at the COJO Forum. I think that people don't understand what this plan is. And I think that one of the problems that we're facing is that the county didn't have any idea what people understand about this. So however robust and helpful their outreach may have been, it may have been based on empirical data on what people are thinking. So that's why I'm asking. I'll email you.
Yeah, let's focus on the pedestrian safety, the pedestrian master plan and the questions around that. We'll have an opportunity to talk about some of these other things later. Peggy?
Yes, the questions and comments put into the chat tend to be very short and to the point. Could you focus on those before taking people who raise their hand?
If there's no objection, I see Peggy, you have a comment in the chat, and I can work through that. Jackie, if there's no objection on your end.
Sure, please go
Okay.
ahead.
So Peggy's asked if the pedestrian plan has covered where new shared use paths, like along Pepco's power line trail across county and state roads, upgrades will be needed wherever these paths cross to make sure that they can be safe. Improving what we call protected crossings, so protected places to safely cross these roads. And we know that sort of through existing processes where the planning department reviews public capital projects, which include trails and sidewalks and other things, that we have an opportunity to make sure that those crossings are safe. So either through the pedestrian plan itself or through our existing review processes, I think we can be very certain that those crossings will be upgraded to be made more pedestrian friendly. So very good question. Peggy also asked about pedestrian refuges. If they're built between the lanes, pedestrians and bicyclists could safely and easily cross streets without needing crossing lights. There is a recommendation about providing more pedestrian refuges on our wider roads. I think it specifically says it should be, either required or very strongly encouraged on roads that have 6 lanes. Just starting at sort of the highest priority roads, so roads with 6 lanes at an intersection. Jackie had asked about old trees and trees essentially disturbing sidewalks and hurting accessibility. This is a really common problem, I think, in some of the older neighborhoods in Montgomery County. And we do, in addition to the recommendations we're putting forward, there's also going to be a design toolkit associated with the pedestrian plan that has some ideas about how to improve, essentially how to make it so that sidewalks and trees can coexist. So looking into more permeable, flexible pavements that allow trees to thrive while allowing, while creating accessible pedestrian spaces. One of the recommendations I didn't get to talk about is really the importance of shade and shade trees to the pedestrian experience and providing more shade. So that sort of juxtaposition of and trade-off that may exist in some places, we really need to figure out. So I think that's a really key question. HQ has asked if there are recommendations for specific areas or just high-level recommendations. The bulk of this plan is high-level recommendations. I'll just stop sharing so you can see me now, is high-level recommendations. I think there are some pedestrian plans across the country, probably most actually, that will go street by street and say there should be a sidewalk here, there shouldn't be a sidewalk there. That's not really feasible for a county of our size. What we've done in this plan is essentially say that the pedestrian experience should reach a certain level, a certain threshold across the county. And one of the ways that we achieve that actually is this Complete Streets Design Guide, which I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, which is essentially a coordinated effort between our department and the Department of Transportation to create a vision for every type of road in the county. So essentially that document says, if you're on a neighborhood street, the sidewalk should be 6 feet wide, ideally. The buffer between the sidewalk and the street should be 6 feet wide, X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth, just figuring out what the cross section of the street is. So just like a neighborhood street, we have the same types of recommendations in that Complete Streets Design Guide for downtown streets, so streets in like down through downtown Silver Spring or Bethesda. So this, because that document exists, this is not a plan that needs to make those specific recommendations for specific streets, because that document is really handling how we reimagine how we reconstruct our streets moving forward to provide more pedestrian space. Jackie also asked, just reading this now, do you want to describe the situation?
Well, we had, I'd seen there was stuff on the county website about like it's like painting the intersections. You make the crosswalk can be very vibrantly painted, bright, and maybe even designs in the center between, you know, if it's in a square, you know, 2 roads coming together. And I thought that was a really neat idea, and our civic association was interested. We thought maybe we could have a contest for that. If we're right near 2 high schools, they're on either end of our territory, and we thought if we had the art students there, we could have an art contest for them to design this, and then the community could paint it. And I approached the Department of Transportation for the county, and they said no. They said you can't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that would be on their website if you couldn't do it. I do know in the past, certain parts of the department have been hesitant to encourage like they're called like art crosswalks, like, and I think there are some concerns from them that there isn't support for doing that, like from the federal level, which is like where the design requirements for traffic type things come down from. So from the state and federal level, I don't really share that concern. So I think, yeah, it's probably worth us bringing it up again in our recommendations to see if we can get some progress on that.
Okay. Well, Chris Reynolds has offered to pay my bail if we go ahead and do it. So,
well, you're recording this meeting, I would remind you. So,
Whoops.
Maybe don't
We
do
can
that.
just edit that bit out.
Yeah,
They're on to
sure.
us, Jackie. Please.
No objection, no objection here. Good question. HQ asks, when I say assume county control over state roads, are we assuming the county will be responsible for funding state road pedestrian improvements? Yeah, I think we're still in very, very early stages of what this would entail, but essentially, one path forward would be that the county assumes ownership of these roads and at the same time receives from the state the maintenance funding for that, the amount of roadway miles that we assume from the state. So we get the money that goes to maintain those roads too. And then we just treat them like county roads. So we build the sidewalks, we do what we need to do, we repave on these roads. There are obviously many other scenarios where the state may retain ownership, but we have other sorts of control or other arrangements that would just allow us the flexibility to be more responsive to making changes to these roads, to improving their safety and things like that. So it's sort of really early days there. HQ had another question about utilities. Where they live, there are telephone poles in the middle of the sidewalk. Does this plan make any recommendations about that? Are there recommendations to underground utilities? Yes, there are in the expand access section, EA2, and it's about removing sidewalk obstructions. So prioritizing places where we can remove telephone poles from the middle of sidewalks, working to ensure that as telephone poles are replaced, if there's a better place to put them than in the middle of the sidewalk where it is right now, we make sure it doesn't just end up in a hole right next to the pole that exists today. It actually gets moved to that better, more pedestrian friendly spot. So that involves this recommendation is sort of based on feedback actually that we've gotten since publishing this. That recommendation isn't in this section currently, but I just wrote it a couple of days ago. It's going to include making recommendations to change essentially the utility right-of-way permitting process so that the utilities replacing the poles move them out of the sidewalk. Essentially right now, there's no requirement that they do that, but being more specific about where the poles need to go so they can get out of the sidewalk. Amy, I think the last question in the chat, and then I see Alan has his hand up, asks how we envision monitoring of the plan taking place. I think a couple of things. There'll be a set of performance metrics that are things like the number of elementary school kids walking to school, the percentage of middle school kids, like number of metrics that we'll collect data from over the next couple years. But then we'll also be coordinating with an interagency group to monitor how the recommendations themselves are being implemented. And we'll be putting all of that information in a report that's going to come out every 2 years to share the progress that we're making. And then also, I think, to use that as an opportunity to look back and say, well, what do we need to prioritize in the 2 years ahead? What needs an additional look? Are there tweaks to these recommendations that should be made based on the discussions that we've had or experiences over the past 2 years? So it'll sort of be an iterative process, but there'll be a mixture of data sources that we'll combine and then we'll share with the public on our website. So
I
Alan.
think where that question was coming from was that I think we've all seen situations where policies are developed, but then, when it hits the ground, nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And, there has to be some kind of a commitment that, and I was kind of wondering and it kind of sounds like you have some plans to make that kind of commitment. So that's good to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the challenge that we have as a planning department is that we set the vision for what we want the county to be. We want it to be more pedestrian friendly. We want to achieve these performance measures and achieve these goals. But most of the time, actually implementing that vision is in the hands of other agencies. So a lot of our work after the plan is adopted is really about putting pressure, advocating internally in county government with elected officials to make sure that the priorities that we've identified in the plan, the priorities that the county council has approved by approving the plan, actually come to fruition, like you said. So this is not a plan that we want to sit on the shelf, obviously, and collect dust. We want it to be implemented. And part of that is just is me and my colleagues really actively following up and making sure that the recommendations in here are happening. So I appreciate that concern, and I think I share it.
Eli, I would also add that, we produce every 2 years the travel monitoring report, and the last one was for 2021, and we are already starting to think about how we're going to be preparing the one that we'll be releasing next year. In addition to that, every 2 years we release a monitoring report on progress on the bicycle master plan, and so that's also due in 2023. And the thought is that we're going to start trying to combine all of these into one kind of comprehensive monitoring assessment report, and that the pedestrian master plan monitoring report can also be kind of weaved into that as well.
So I have a last question for you, Eli, and it has to do with something I've been interested in for a long time, and that's sort of the cultural aspects of pedestrian safety. And I'm wondering, to what extent does how people from different parts of the world who now live in Montgomery County deal with the pedestrian safety on the streets, and whether or not that's part of your analysis?
I think it's a good question, and it has been brought up. I think it's something we've heard over the years. I think there is probably a role for looking at that a bit further. We have a recommendation in the plan, or there will be a recommendation in the draft plan to conduct more, I would say, culturally specific, culturally sensitive, or more extensive traffic safety engagement in different languages and in different places across the county that may reach more people than we've traditionally reached with our traffic safety work. But at the same time, I think the overriding issue from a traffic safety perspective is just speeds, honestly, speeds and larger vehicles. So that while the plan has recommendations about improving education, I think the extent to which we can improve driving and get people driving safer and improving visibility between modes, I think we're going to be a lot more successful. So I think it is in there, but it's definitely not, I think, the focus of the plan.
And then just to append upon what you just mentioned, so members of the planning department have been pushing something 20 is plenty, wondering whether or not that's been fully developed. It's still an idea whether or not you're doing that any place, making that recommendation to Department of Transportation, that in some of the residential areas, the old ones, like East Silver Spring, that you have a 20 is plenty policy.
Sure. So yes, that is actually also an international sort of approach to traffic safety, lowering speed limits to 20 miles per hour. Recently, the state passed legislation allowing the Montgomery County to lower speed limits to 20 miles per hour. I believe that they actually allowed us to lower them to 15 miles an hour if we chose to. So I think the Department of Transportation continues to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But I think there is probably merit to us including a recommendation for a lot of these sort of more constrained streetwise, like residential areas, like you're talking about, like East Silver Spring, probably Chevy Chase, maybe parts of Aspen Hill, some of these communities where essentially the design speed of the road, the way the road is designed, the safe speed to drive on a road like that is not 25. It's actually probably 20 or 15. So I think there's definitely merit in sort of exploring a recommendation for these types of residential areas as well.
Well, thank you so much for that.
And
And for
Alan,
next question, yeah, go ahead,
if I could
Jason.
just add also that right now the county council is looking at there are 3 bills: a ZTA, a subdivision regulation amendment, and a bill to modify county code to implement the Complete Streets Design Guide. And one of the things that the planning board recommended with regard to that on 20 is plenty is for our neighborhood connector, which are relatively smaller streets in our neighborhoods that might connect various neighborhoods, actually recommending a target speed of 20 miles per hour and actually reflecting that 20 is plenty the program. So we are kind of pushing that in various ways.
Appreciate that. Any more questions from our group? Well, seeing none, I want to thank you both for joining us this evening to talk about the pedestrian master plan. We will provide information to our members who would like to send recommendations and comments to what we've seen. And we really appreciate you participating in this meeting tonight, and look forward to hearing updates in the near future. So thank you, Eli, and thank you, Jason, for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. And I
Anytime.
look forward to
Thank you.
hearing from you. Yep. Take care.
I'd like to turn the program over to Jerry Garson to introduce our guest from State Highway about State Highway's plans for the American Legion Bridge and for I-270. Jerry?
I'm Jerry Garson, the Transportation Chair of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, Inc. I would like to introduce Jeff Folden, the State Highway Administration Project Director, who was formerly called the P3 Project and is now called Op Lanes, Maryland. Without any further ado, I'd like to have Jeff speak and introduce his team.
Jerry, hi, this is Kathy Smith, and I'm with the Op Lanes Maryland program, and I will be facilitating for the State Highway group tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And please, you all let me know, can you see our cover page?
Not yet.
No, not yet. All
Let me
right,
check
try
here. Multiple. You should be able to share.
Trying to do that now. Let's see. And hold on. I also have, and let me share sound as well. There you go. All right. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can get.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much. Let me close some more background down. So all I am is focused on all of you. So thanks again for having us here tonight and inviting us to hear about what's going on with the pedestrian access plan in Montgomery County. That's very informative. As we're getting late in the evening, I'm going to keep going. I think we've all had welcomes. Again, I'm Kathy Smith. I'm the community liaison with State Highway Administration. Here tonight, we have our director of the project, Jeff Folden from State Highway. And we do have a couple of our technical experts, Melanie Ernest and Brian Townsend, listening in. So when we get to the Q&A, should you have specifics that require their assistance, they're there to help out. Our agenda tonight, we'll be talking about the new American Legion Bridge I-270, I-70 traffic relief plan, providing an overview. We'll catch you up to date on the I-495 and I-270 managed lane study. We'll give you a little info about phase 1 north of the project, the public-private partnership, and take questions and answers. So without further ado, I can get our video going. I'm not sure what's going on. We're supposed to have a lovely video right now, but it is giving me a hard time. So I'm going to keep going and I will provide a link to that when I send the slide deck over for review. Jeff, are you ready?
Sure, let's get started. You go next slide. There we go. So the new American Legion Bridge I-270 to I-70 traffic relief plan is the first phase of Op Lanes, Maryland. It's been broken into 2 smaller sub-phases or sections, and we call those phase 1 south and phase 1 north. Phase 1 South is on I-495 from south of the George Washington Memorial Parkway in Virginia and goes north across the American Legion Bridge up I-495 to I-270, and then up I-270 to north of I-370. And it's completed the environmental review process under the National Environmental Policy Act under the I-495 and I-270 managed lane study. Phase 1 North is a separate study from I-370 to I-70. We've currently done pre-NEPA work, so pre-National Environmental Policy Act work, and we plan to begin a formal environmental review process next year. Next slide, please. Some key benefits of Phase 1. Well, first and foremost, the private financing we get will help us replace the American Legion Bridge and improve existing pavement and bridges within the corridor. And that's about a $1.2 billion estimated savings to the state. So the overall project costs between $3.75 and $4.25 billion. But of that, about $1.2 billion, or 30 to 35%, is going to replace the existing American Legion Bridge and also upgrade existing bridges and pavements within the section that would have to be done in the next decade, regardless of this project. So it's a direct savings to our Transportation Trust Fund. And that will allow that $1.2 billion, instead of going to state of good repair in this corridor, to be used for other improvements throughout the state. So other transit and highway improvements in Maryland. Next slide, please. Another key benefit is reducing congestion in the corridor. Just replacing the American Legion Bridge alone will not reduce congestion, but the provision of a new high occupancy toll or hot lanes, which are proposed under Phase 1 South, will actually reduce system-wide delay over the corridor of the managed lane study by up to 38% in the PM peak. And also off the highway system, off the interstate, it'll reduce the congestion on the Montgomery County arterial roadway system about 5%. So by using this private funding to do this, we can provide traffic relief. Also, these private funds will bring billions in economic investment into the state of Maryland and boost our regional economic activity. Study from George Mason University estimates that there'll be a $12.6 billion boost to regional economic activity from Phase 1. And that includes about 43,000 new job years of employment over the entirety of Phase 1. Next slide, please. Additionally, the public-private partnership and private funding will provide new funding for Montgomery County transit priorities. That includes $60 million that's being planned to design the Maryland 355 Flash BRT, another $250 million in capital improvements to the Shady Grove Metro and Westfield Montgomery Mall Transit Center to provide bus bays and increase parking, and also to construct the Metropolitan Grove Bus and Operations Maintenance Facility, which is going to be supporting transit in the region. And then additional $300 million over the operating term of the public-private partnership, which will support priority transit improvements across Montgomery County. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how the hot lane network on I-495 and I-270 can support new enhanced transit in the region. So the new hot lane system on the interstate system will provide a backbone for express bus transit throughout the region, which can connect places like Tysons, Bethesda, Gaithersburg, Germantown, continuing north up into Clarksburg and Frederick. So, the hot lanes don't just provide opportunities for vehicles, but also provide these new opportunities for transit throughout the region that can be time competitive to single occupancy vehicle travel. Next slide, please. Additionally, the project's not just looking at highway improvements, but we're looking at bicycle and pedestrian improvements as well. One of the most important pedestrian and bicycle improvements is a new shared use path across the American Legion Bridge that will connect new trails in Fairfax County, Virginia, with the C&O Canal here in Maryland. Additionally, throughout the Phase 1 South corridor, and you can see on this map, there'll be new and upgraded pedestrian and bicycle facilities where the interstates today are barriers for bike and ped travel. So that includes new and upgraded sidewalks, new and upgraded bike lanes, shared lanes, side paths, and off-street trails. And I thought it'd be important to know, we've been coordinating very closely with Montgomery County Department of Transportation and Maryland, Montgomery County Planning on this, and have looked at implementing the Complete Streets design guide throughout these arterial connections and these new bike and ped facilities we're talking about here. Next slide, please. So now I want to take a few minutes to talk about the I-495 and I-270 managed lane study under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So this is the environmental process that determines if the project would move forward into final design and construction, which was completed back in August. It's been going on for about 4.5 years. We started in spring of 2018, where we held scoping public workshops to seek public input. And then we moved forward with an alternatives development process where we identified a full range of alternatives consisting of everything from general purpose lanes, standalone transit alternatives, high occupancy vehicle lanes, travel demand management solutions, high occupancy toll lanes, express toll lanes, and many other alternatives. And then over 2 separate public workshops, we narrowed those alternatives down to what we call the alternatives retained for detailed study, which were included in our draft environmental impact statement last summer, summer of 2020. So after we released that draft environmental impact statement, we held public hearings on that draft environmental impact statement. Subsequent to that, from the feedback we got, we actually created a new alternative, which was just for phase 1 south, and put out a supplemental draft environmental impact statement and held another public hearing fall of last year. Then we've taken all of that feedback and we created a final environmental impact statement, which we put out in June of this past spring, the end of the spring. And then the environmental process was concluded with a record of decision by the Federal Highway Administration back in August. So what that record decision does is it authorizes us to move forward with additional activities such as final design, construction, acquiring permits and such. So we're in the process now of acquiring permits and then initiating the final design process for this phase 1 south project. Next slide, please. So throughout the process, we've had significant stakeholder engagement. That included nearly 40 agency partners we had in this, where we had significant meetings with them and working through their comments and concerns. Elected official meetings and briefings with county, state, federal, and local officials, also the public. As I noted, we've had multiple rounds of public workshops and public hearings, but we've also had over 200 individual community and stakeholder meetings and events such as this one. And then we've had other processes where we've done consulting through with the Section 106's historic resources process. We formed a regional transit working group that looked at how these managed lanes can support transit through the region, a regional economic working group, and an environmental justice working group that looked at how these improvements can benefit the communities at the local level. Next slide, please. So the selected alternative from the managed lane study is known as phase 1 south. And if you look at the map on your right, the managed lane study covers 48 miles, what you see in the dark blue and the light blue. So from the George Washington Memorial Parkway over to Maryland 5 on the Capitol Beltway, and then on I-270 up to I-370. So the selected alternative looked at only improvements within the dark blue limits, what we call phase 1 south. So everything in light blue as part of the selected alternative will have no improvements or no action. And what that means is this study determined that there won't be action as part of this study, but any future improvements that are needed, which we do believe they are still definitely needed to these other areas of the Beltway, would have to progress under a separate environmental review process. So the selected alternative is proposing 2 new lanes on I-495, which would be high occupancy toll or hot lanes, which would provide free travel for vehicles with 3 or more people, for transit, and for those who choose to pay a toll. Also on 495, the American Legion Bridge will be fully reconstructed. So a new bridge will be built, basically 2 new bridges. One, you would build the bridge in stages where the bridge is built to the outside first. And then once the outside portions of the bridge are built, you'd shift traffic to the outside, then rebuild the inside of the bridge. So you would be maintaining traffic at all times on that bridge, during peak hours. Also on 270, we're looking to add 1 new lane in each direction and repurpose the existing high occupancy vehicle lane as a high occupancy toll lane. So it would allow toll payers should also use that lane as well, as opposed to just vehicles, high occupancy vehicles. Next slide, please. Throughout the corridor, there'll be different access points to the hot lanes. You can see here on this slide, the letters in purple, that represents interchanges where you may enter the hot lanes from the interchange. Additionally, there's in the orange, you can see locations where you can transition between the general purpose or the lanes and the hot lanes. And you can also get in and out of the hot lanes at the beginning of the system, north of 370 or west of I-490, excuse me, west of Maryland 187. Next slide, please. So the selected alternative improves travel speeds in all the improved segments of 495, as you can see here. You can see whether you're traveling in the general purpose lanes or the hot lanes in 2045 in the morning or the evening peak, you'll see improvement in travel times. There is one section where we have a very slight improvement of about a mile per hour in general purpose lanes, and that's on the inner loop in the evening peak from George Washington Memorial Parkway to 270. And I talked about this a minute earlier, is there's no improvements to the top side of the Beltway proposed under this. And what we've found is by not improving the top side of the Beltway, traffic that today backs up on the top side of the Beltway and the PM peak near the I-270 West Spur is just going to continue to back up further in the future. So until we do something to address that separately from this project, we are not going to see significant improvement in that section. Next slide, please. And similar on 270, we see travel speeds improve in both directions in the morning and evening peak, with the exception of 270 northbound, the PM peak, where traffic backing up north of 370, which backs up today, is going to continue to grow and back up. But that backup will be addressed as part of the I-270 Phase 1 North project that we're beginning next year. Next slide, please. So this right here represents the environmental process, what we've gone through, our draft environmental impact statement to our supplemental draft environmental impact statement to the final environmental impact statement. And you can see how we've reduced impacts to the communities and environmental resources. So we're at the point we have no residential or business displacements. We've reduced the amount of right-of-way needed, reduced park impacts. Both the National Park Service and the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission reduced impacts to other environmental resources such as wetlands, floodplains, forests, and waterways. So we've worked very diligently to do this, and we're going to continue to work to reduce impacts even further as final design progresses. Next slide, please. So I noted we looked at a whole lot of various alternatives and getting to the selected alternative. One we did look at was we did look at reversible lanes within the limits of Phase 1 South. We determined that this was not the right alternative for this section for a few reasons. One, the future peak volumes are too great in both directions to simply reverse an existing lane on 270. So I-270 southbound the PM peak, traffic would back up significantly, reducing speeds to approximately 20 miles per hour if no lanes were added and an existing lane was reversed. Additionally, there would not be adequate capacity northbound in the morning peak if we reversed an existing lane northbound. Also, if you can see the picture at the bottom right, that shows a real existing reversal lane system today, and you can see there's barriers on each side of it plus a shoulder. So due to this, the environmental property and construction impacts of reversal lanes would be very similar to the select alternative we're proposing. It's not simply just a little bit of paint and concrete. It's a significant reconstruction of the entire roadway to put in reversible lanes. And while we didn't find reversible lanes the right solution for Phase 1 South, they can still be looked at for Phase 1 North for the future. Next slide, please. So
Jeff,
right here, this.
See if I can
Okay,
get
go ahead.
this to work.
Okay, well, let me say what they are first before we hit play.
Sure.
So on the left, we're going to show you a simulation of the selected alternative, which, no, sorry, I'm reversed here. On the left, we're going to show the reversible lane alternative. The left of the screen, that'll show what it would look like if we took an existing lane away and reversed it. And this simulation was for 2040 traffic. On the right, we'll show our selected alternative, which includes just adding one lane in each direction on 270 and turning the existing high occupancy vehicle lane into a hot lane. So if you can try to hit play on both at the same time, that'd be great.
They are giving me a hard time today. I got them to work earlier, but now in Zoom, they're just not.
Hit the down arrow on your computer twice. See if that works.
Down arrow on the computer twice. One more time. Hit what?
Hit the down arrow. Just see if it.
This one? I'm not sure. I apologize. Technical difficulties.
Okay, well, let's just keep going. We can try to come back and maybe I'll try to
Okay.
share here at the end.
Okay.
See if we can.
Sorry about that.
So next slide. So just want to talk real quick about the toll setting process. You know, we followed the same laws that we would follow for setting tolls for any toll facility in the state of Maryland. Different here, we set a toll rate range that would have a minimum and a maximum. And what we did find, though, in setting this range and how we would expect the tolls to be implemented, that you know, the cost of tolls here is about a little less than $4 on average, which is a little less than you see on I-495 in Virginia and on I-95 in Virginia, or similar facilities across the country. So we don't see these lanes are not unaffordable. But it's also important to note that these lanes aren't to be used by most people every day. They're really to be used when you have a critical trip and somewhere you need to be, like getting to a child's event, getting to a doctor's appointment for such. And we do see that in Virginia, where the vast majority of customers who use these lanes spend less than $20 per month. So they're there for when you need them. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide. We are delivering this as a public-private partnership. Different than the purple one, though, we're using what's called a progressive P3. And under progressive P3, what we do is we solicit early in the process for a partner we call our phase developer. And then we work collaboratively with the phase developer and all of our stakeholders in further developing the project, which we've been doing since we awarded the pre-development work contract last year, about August of last year. Once the pre-development work's completed, the phase developer is going to submit to us a proposal that'll cover the final design, construction, financing, operation, and maintenance for phase 1 south. So once that's done, we would then work it through the approval process, which would include the Maryland Transportation Authority Board and the Board of Public Works. And if that's approved, we would move forward with the final design, construction, financing, operation, and maintenance for phase 1 south. And a similar process will be followed for phase 1 north as well under this same contract. Next slide, please. And just real quick, I want to talk about phase 1 north for a second. We've been doing pre-NEPA work where we've been doing existing research, developing existing condition surveys and looking at the needs of this corridor. So what we've proposing right now is the needs for our future phase 1 study are reducing congestion, improving trip reliability. So trying to give people a more reliable trip so that they know better that it's going to take them X amount of time to get somewhere, enhancing multimodal connectivity. So providing new ability for new options of travel through the corridor, and financial viability. So doing this in a way that we can minimize impacts to our transportation trust fund and provide the dollars needed to deliver the project. So this project was included in the most recent regional plan for planning and design. And it's in our current budget that's will be submitted to the legislature next year. So assuming everything is approved by the legislature, we've been moving forward with the National Environmental Policy Act study here. Next slide, please. So that's our update for now. We can take some questions in a second. Hey, Kathy, before we do, can you
Sure.
can you stop sharing this? I'm going to try to share my screen, see if I can
Okay.
play the reverse.
There you go. See if you can get it to show.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, so on the left is let's see if this works. On the left's the reversible lane alternative. which would reverse an existing lane. So no new lanes would be added and an existing lane would be reversed. And this is in 2040, looking south from Maryland 28. And on the right would be a simulation model of the select alternative where we would add one lane each direction and convert the high axis vehicle lane to a high axis toll lane. So hopefully this works. Nope. There we go. So you can see the significant backups on the left side when you're reversing existing lane. On the right side, you can see the traffic is free flow. This is IPM, so what you see is sometimes traffic from 3 to 4, 5.
Jeff, you've become unintelligible. Your voice is not coming through.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it wasn't working with the video when the videos were running. It, I think it was draining your
Yeah, I
your
think so.
bandwidth.
Sorry about that. I don't think I can talk and do it at the same time. But on the
I
left,
think we
you
got
could
the
see,
idea.
yeah, on the left you could see the significant backups. And what I was trying to say was by reversing a lane between 3 and 4 and 4 to 5, you don't have capacity to move the traffic you need to during those hours. So the traffic continues to back up and grow, which is what you see at that 5 o'clock condition. But when you have the capacity in the selected alternative, that doesn't occur. So you don't get those significant backups you can see there. Anyway.
Okay, thanks so much. So we are welcoming any questions folks might have on the project.
This is Jerry Garson. I want to thank you for giving an excellent presentation. And one question I've got from a number of people is, will there be tow trucks, including heavy duty ones, assigned to the areas when the construction starts? Because once construction starts, a lot of people start slowing down just to look at the construction and maybe even put some what I call screening to sort of block some of the construction work from the people, because whenever they see it, they slow down.
Mr. Garson, we'll have to go look into that one. I'm not sure. I mean, we haven't got to that level of detail, but we've got an operations and maintenance manager and developing an operations and maintenance, an O&M plan and a traffic control plan during construction. So let me take that back to our team and let's see what we can do about that. So
thank you.
Ken Bauer, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. This is, I think, the second or third presentation of this kind that I've heard, and it's kind of the same dog and pony show. Everything's wonderful. This is a great project. What could possibly go wrong? So let me just throw out a couple things. One is the late great Ron Kirby, who was the head of the COG Transportation Planning Board, routinely would say, "We just can't build ourselves out of gridlock." My rhetorical question, and I don't need you to answer, is, why do we think this road expansion project is going to be different than any other project in the history of the country? Yeah, it's gonna, it may help out, for 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, but it encourages development. I mean, historically, these projects this encourage development, and we're back in square one. So it's really a death spiral. The other comment I'd make is the JPA on the specifically on the mitigation project and the analysis, it was a joke. I mean, I actually went up and looked at the mitigation sites up in upper Montgomery County. And first of all, you're destroying natural areas down county, and then the proposal is to try and make the world right by doing mitigation projects in the upper part of the county. So it really doesn't, it really is not a zero-sum game, is it? The fact is that these mitigation projects, they don't work. Stream restorations do not work. All the research says that the results of these stream mitigation projects do not result in any biological uplift. The science just isn't there. The wetland mitigations don't work. You can Google, as I did, the results of mitigation projects, and you simply don't get the kind of results, end results, when you try and build a wetland project to match what's been destroyed. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Alan, you have a comment, a question?
I do. I appreciate the presentation, and I learned some things, but I think I'm more confused than ever. So just a couple of hopefully easy questions. And one is, what's the time frame for replacing the bridge? And then will there ever be a point where phase south and phase north would be under construction at the same time? I know the NEPA study hasn't been completed for north, but I'm wondering if there's going to be a time when both of those projects are going to be underway. And is it going to be completed before 2045?
Jeff, did you?
Um,
Go ahead.
Sure. I'll start with, so the bridge, we don't have a construction schedule to begin yet, but we do, we have estimated the time frame to build the entire project. And that's, the bridge is really the critical path. The largest item to build is about 5 to 6 years. And as far as, phase one south and phase one north, our intention would be to finish off the phase one north planning while phase one south is in construction, so we can move phase one north into construction before phase one south is totally finished. So you can continue the work north in a seamless manner as possible.
But you expect it to take 25 years to finish all of that, sort of on this,
No,
this western spur?
No,
Yeah.
it would take about 6 years to do phase one south, and then, certainly don't have an alternative yet or anything like that, but 4 to 6 years again for phase one north. So, 10 years or so, 10 to 12 years.
Then why use 2045 as sort of the metric for what the traffic capacity would be instead of 2035, let's say, or 2030?
Well, we always plan out to the horizon here, which is about 20 to 25 years in the future. That's what we do for any major project like this, whether it be transit or highway.
And then I've got another question that you might be able to unpack. It had to do with that second slide. I was surprised that you were estimating that $600 million would sort of be dedicated to transit and transportation improvements in Montgomery County. Is that money that goes to the county, or is that savings that the county would have because it would not have to do some of those busways and transit connections?
So the 610 million, there's kind of three pieces. There's $60 million, which would go to the county for design of the Maryland 355 BRT. And that would, when we close financial close of phase one south, so we've signed the final agreement and the developer has lined all their financing and got that all approved, they would have to give us a $60 million check that would go to Montgomery County. Part two is $250 million of improvements as part of the construction to Shady Grove, Westfield Montgomery, and the Metropolitan Grove Operations Maintenance Facility. So those would be done during that construction period I talked about. So that's $250 million. And the third is $300 million over the operating term. So the $300 million could be used, we would get dollars every year of the operating term, starting at about, I think, 2.9 million and escalating on an annual basis that could then go to support transit improvements in the county.
So I was surprised by the magnitude of that funding that would benefit Montgomery County. I was wondering if that was part of the deal that had to be made among stakeholders, to make this thing happen. And I wonder if there's any, guarantees. I live on the Purple Line alignment on Wayne Avenue in East Silver Spring, and we saw the amount of the total project reduced pretty substantially by a move by Governor Hogan when he became governor. So instead of getting a Cadillac a light rail system, we're getting a Chevrolet light rail system. And I'm wondering whether or not, what kind of guarantees are in the agreement to make sure that Montgomery County benefits to the 610 million. in the same vein, so I'd like you to answer that question. The second one is, there was some there's been some ongoing controversy about the ICC and other state project like this, and I think we were promised a bike lane system that went from one end to another, and I don't think that the bike lane is connected, along the alignment, and I wonder, well, why that hasn't happened, and two, can we guarantee that the bike lanes will be constructed as proposed, at least in these early stages of the presentation?
Yeah, so let me start with the transit piece and you asked for guarantees. So in the Federal Highway Administration's record decision, it was contingent upon these transit commitments being delivered as part of this public-private partnership with private financing and this phase developer. So as long as this moves forward, those transit pieces have to be included for Federal Highway to approve. So that's the best guarantee I can give you on that. As far as the ICC, and I'm certainly not the expert on this, but what I understand is there were certain roadways, and I can't remember the names of them. I have a map somewhere I could probably send you after this. I'll have to go back and find it. But the state was going to work with the local DOT on implementing those connections, and then they just never have occurred. So I'm not sure why, but they were not on state roadways. My understanding, they were on the local roadway system.
Yeah, we're just concerned that there's a lot of promises being made about financial commitment to the county, and I understand about the federal record of decision, but there's a lot of improvements that are not the toll lanes that have to do with adjacent communities, and my experience over here in Silver Spring is that they're worth the paper they're written on, and that there are no guarantees. Just saying. Somebody else had a question. Jackie, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Can I, this is Jerry Gostin, I'd like to speak on the exact question about the ICC and the bike pass. I originally gotten a commitment from the Maryland Transportation Authority to actually include bike pass on, but various environmental groups objected to the bike pass because they said it would increase the amount of impervious surface. So in working with the various environmental groups, they agreed to drop the bike path, but they were willing to fund the bike path the entire length until the people objected to it.
Okay. Jackie?
I have a question about your plan there that includes a BRT coming the entire length down at 270. And could you expound on that a little bit? Would there be a separate lane for the BRT? Where are people going to get on and off the BRT from 270? And where's it going to dump them? I mean, it seems like it comes down to the 495 and ends, and people coming down either 270 either go into DC or they go across the bridge into Virginia. And what's going to happen to them? Where do you dump them?
So this slide probably is what you're referring to. So it's not a BRT, it's a express bus. So the managed lanes will allow buses to use the managed lanes for free. So you can enter onto the lanes and a bus can ride from, let's just say, Shady Grove Metro. You could pick up passengers there, take down the managed lanes into Tyson's and drop you off down in Tyson's, as an example.
Okay, I thought you had BRT on one of those.
That might be this previous slide. If you go back one, that's 355 BRT. That's the county project that's using these funds to design it.
Okay,
So
so that's not on 270.
Correct, that's 355.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But that does mean that large part of Montgomery County's BRT system is contingent on, this project going forward in the way that you would like it to go forward. Is that correct?
The funding we're providing is contingent upon that. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, who else has questions for our friends at State Highway? I think we may want to have another presentation because it is very complicated, especially the relationships between what the state wants to do on I-270 and the impacts on the neighborhoods. I know that there are people who are concerned about being able to get access onto the managed toll lanes. And then I think some of us have some questions about its impact on the environment. Can you just make a statement and just tell us, we're looking at the slide, not the reversible lane slide, but the managed toll lane slide. What does it do to the footprint of I-270? How much is 270 its width expanded with this project?
Well, it depends on where you're at on 270, but like if you're going through the area where you have the collector distributor lanes and the concrete barrier between the local lanes and the express lanes, as the signs say, there's actually very minimal. There is no actual pavement widening there except at the interchanges. So that's actually within the pavement because we're adding one lane by repurposing that barrier area between the collector distributor lanes and the express lanes today. So there's not a lot of widening on 270 in that area. When you get further south where you don't have that collector distributor lane, we're adding one lane. So there generally would be, 12 feet to 15 feet of pavement added depending on where you're at. But most of the work outside the pavement is, things like drainage, so building pipes, building drainage ditches and stormwater management facilities, building noise walls and things like that.
And do you envision, well, two things, you envision noise walls, through the length of the managed toll lane section? I mean, all the way from the spur up to a 370. That's the first question. And then one of your first slides said that there was no displacement of businesses and residences, homes, as you come off the American Legion Bridge and go through some of those communities there up toward the spur. No loss of buildings, no loss of businesses.
So yeah, that's correct. There are no businesses or homes that we have identified that would need to be taken for these improvements. But back to your first question, sound barriers, not everywhere throughout the corridor, but many places throughout the corridor. And we've got an online map that does show that. But so basically what we do is we go through and we identify any communities that are considered impacted by noise. And then we do an analysis to see if we can provide a barrier that can reasonably reduce sound by a certain level. And anywhere where basically it fell under our policy and the federal regulations, there'll be a sound barrier provided, but they aren't everywhere. So.
Peggy Dennis, you're muted. There you go.
This is Bob Dennis. In one of your slides, you showed improvements to existing crossings across the Beltway and 270. And those are places where on the existing roads, it is terrifying to ride a bicycle across the interstate. What sort of improvements are you envisaging there?
No, I think it depends on where you're at. You're looking at, bike lanes on road, shared use paths, off lanes, things like that. Brian Townsend, do you want to speak to that a little bit, just a high level?
Sure, thanks, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, at different crossings, and we do have this slide that kind of depicts the various types of improvements. We, as he mentioned, we did some work with MCDOT and planning to get an understanding of the complete streets guidance that is coming online for the county, and to understand, make sure we're interpreting master plans correctly regarding where shared use paths are proposed, whether they're connecting elements of existing shared use paths or facilities that providing the width on bridges and along the road will be useful for future improvements. So Kind of up and down the corridor, we just have, new shared use path connections that don't exist. Sidewalks at a minimum on both sides of the roadway. And again, just moving towards the county's complete. Where the interstate's going to go over a roadway, sometimes we're just providing the width under the bridge for if a shared use path is planned, but there's nothing there today, such as along Tuckerman Lane, which has a breezeway. So that space will be there for the future facility. So,
well, the issue has to do with crossing the slip roads, which is usually a crossing at a sharp angle, and there's fast-moving traffic coming up the slip roads. So you really need some method of stopping the traffic so that so the bikes can go by.
Or slowing it way down.
Or slowing it way down, yeah.
Appreciate that, and that's one of the things that'll be looked at some more in final design, is taking a look at how to incorporate the county's guidance for crossing some of those, like you're saying, free flow ramps, etc., and the improvements that can be done for shared use paths and sidewalks in those types of environments.
Thank you.
Brian, can you define what a breezeway is? We have a question on that.
Sure. A breezeway is essentially a fairly large facility in the county's master plan that incorporates a bicycle element and a pedestrian element. I believe those may be, kind of a side-by-side pedestrian facility and bike facility. So kind of a very high level facility that, is meant to probably provide high level of service for bicyclists and pedestrians on longer distances. But that is all in the county's master plan.
And you said the one showing here on our map here at around N, is that Tuckerman?
Yeah, so Tuckerman's actually further south, and that's a future breezeway that we would be providing the space. It's about where there's an interstate shield symbol kind of north of the M, north of where the east and west spur come together is Tuckerman. So,
Got it.
So there wouldn't be nothing to connect to. It would just be the space. So there are other locations in the master plan where providing the breezeway width at this time would connect to existing facilities. And so we are looking to do that as part of this project.
Okay,
I'm
great.
sorry, you're calling it a facility. I still don't know what you mean by that. Is it a lane?
So it's a separated, I guess you could kind of think of it as there are shared use paths currently along Goody Drive, along Wooten Parkway. So it's kind of a wider facility than those shared use paths. I think they tend to be about 16 feet in width, and they could be, I don't know exactly what the details of some of those planned facilities are, but they could provide a bikeway that's separate from the sidewalk potentially. So they're kind of both off the roadway, but parallel to the roadway in the case of what would be in this project. Breezeways don't need to be parallel to a roadway necessarily, but they would be at all the instances here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Karen?
Yeah, I just had a question. When you're saying again that you don't have to take businesses or residences, how close is this going to end up being to them that you don't take? In other words, you're not taking my house, but am I going to have a 8-lane road in my backyard? I mean, how much clearance do you expect to have between the roadway and the businesses and homes that are being left?
I mean, it's going to vary throughout the corridor. I don't think we could.
Of course.
I don't think we could hammer down a specific number unless, Brian, you don't think there's a specific number you could say, do you? I can't think of one.
No, I don't think there is, Jeff. But
There's
again,
not
as you
none.
referenced the online information, if someone wanted to see where the LOD is from the FEIS.
And by
we have
LOD,
that
is that
link on
what,
the
limit
website.
of disturbance or something like that?
Yes, sorry, that's the limit of disturbance. So as far as disturbance is anticipated to go throughout the corridor.
I guess just my sense is, are we talking 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet? I mean, do you have any kind of basic sense of what the minimum might be?
Certainly the minimum's less than 100 feet in some locations. But as Jeff mentioned, it varies greatly throughout the corridor.
Something we've been doing, I mean, today we're meeting with you all and you're a larger group that encompasses the entire county, but we are doing briefings such as this for particular communities. And at that time, we do bring mapping and specific information to that community so that they'll have a better sense of what they're going to see close to their homes. That really allows us to focus in on a particular area. So while it's very challenging in this environment to go into detail because it's such a broad project area, if one of your communities wanted a specific briefing so that we could really dive into what the project will look like close to your home, we can do that as well.
Thank you. Ken, you have another question?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. My question is, can you discuss how the greatly increased amount of telecommuting that's being done now due to the pandemic has impacted and influenced your traffic studies, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, we've done some sensitivity analyses on the traffic to say basically, if this happens, what happens to the traffic? And long story short was it demonstrated this project still needed. And the traffic data today, what we see on 495 and on 270 is basically back to pre-pandemic levels. So with 1 million more people and 1.3 million more people and 1 million more jobs here, traffic's just going to continue to grow and get worse without doing something.
Ken, was that a good answer for you?
No, but continue. Everything's great, right?
Peggy, you have your hand up. Do you have another question? Which we'll hear when you unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Given the interest in the environmental community on preserving existing trees, particularly mature ones, how many trees are going to have to be removed to make this happen with the expanded lanes and presumably expanded right-of-way along the sides?
Let's see here. I'm looking at our slide 18. The forest canopy is reduced by 455 acres.
But how many trees is that?
There's no way to calculate that.
You mean
So it's
nobody's gone out and counted the trees and their diameters and measured the actual measurable impact of this?
We do permitting in acres, not in numbers of trees. That's the way it's done.
Oh my.
I don't think we're going to get any more information about that right now, but it is something to follow up on. Any final questions for our friends from the ops? Jerry, do you want to conclude?
We want to thank Jeff Folden and all the other people from State Highway Administration. I think some of the adjacent neighborhoods will probably want additional briefings as it gets closer. such as a neighborhood right by Tuckerman Lane, and 270, which is an underpass, which it sounds like it's going to be widened. I know people there in our neighborhood would have questions about will Tuckerman Lane be closed at any point as they're widening it, or will it just be basically overnight? And I know some of the deer that live in the area are probably particularly upset about any of this work, but I'm quite sure you're not going to meet with the deer that regularly use Tuckerman Lane for crossing between one side of 270 and the other. But I really want to thank you very much, and we'll probably have additional meetings as we get closer to construction actually starting. And if anyone has any questions, they can contact the committee, and I know you have emails and phone numbers that have been provided. We want to thank you very much for this, and we will continue meeting with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We learned a lot, and there's a lot more to learn. So we look forward to continuing this conversation. And so for people on the call who don't belong to State Highway or to the Montgomery County Planning Department, we'd ask you to stay as we end this video, and we'll continue our conversation. So ending the video right now.